recounted to the emperor the treatment I had experienced yesterday at Plantation House. I do not believe, said he, that in all the armies of Europe a man of so ignoble a character could be found. It is the height of baseness for a superior to insult officially an inferior. This man's disposition makes him like a person afflicted with an inveterate itch. He has need of continually rubbing against something, but independent of his natural uneasiness, his intentions are, by bad language and bad treatment, irritate you into a breach of respect to him as governor, which he will convert into an act of violence and proceed against you for an attenta upon him in his official capacity. You are in a very dangerous situation. He has a witness who is his creature and who will sign everything that he dictates and have no other conscience or will than his. You have only your own word to plead, and this man's conduct in endeavoring to make a spy of you by ill treatment and abuse is so extraordinary that people unacquainted with him will have difficulty to believe it. I see no other mode for you to act than to maintain an absolute silence. Hear what he has to say and reply not, unless in answer to medical questions. To those he has the right to expect an answer, but to anything else say, I do not know, or it is no business of mine. 22nd. Underwent a few more interrogations from Sir Hudson Lowe, in which I had the good fortune to leave his house without having been assailed with any outrageous language. 23rd. Cipriani complained this day of inflammation of the bowels, which from the moment he made it known to me presented most formidable appearances. He was very largely bled, put into a warm bath, and recourse had to all the vigorous remedies usually administered in such cases. Only temporary relief, however, was obtained, and the unfavorable symptoms returned with increased aggravation. It was soon evident that his life was in the most imminent danger, and the advice and assistance of other professional men were called in. All, however, was useless, and the complaint was rapidly hurrying him on to dissolution. Cipriani himself, though conscious of his danger, preserved the greatest calmness and composure. Napoleon, who had an affection for him as his countryman, and a man wholly devoted to his service, was extremely anxious for his recovery and frequent in his inquiries. On the 25th, Cipriani was in a state in which persons laboring under the same complaint are sometimes seen. He had experienced some relief from suffering, but it was doubtful whether it arose from the diminution of the violence of the complaint, or was that cessation of pain preceding dissolution produced by mortification. The last was my own opinion, but there was nothing certain. He was in a state of extreme weakness. Nourishment was administered to him at short intervals, which was retained on his stomach. While in this state of doubt, Napoleon, with whom I had been repeatedly during the day to report the state of the patient, sent for me at 12 o'clock at night. I mentioned that Cipriani was lying in a kind of stupor. I think, said he, that my appearance before poor Cipriani would act as a stimulus to slumbering nature, la natura qui dorme, and will rouse her to make new efforts which may finally overcome the disease and save the patient. He endeavored to illustrate this by describing the electric effects which had been produced in many instances by his appearance on the field of battle at most critical moments and times. I replied that Cipriani was still sensible, and that I knew the love and veneration he had for his master to be so great that on his appearance before him he would make an effort to rise in his bed, which exertion in the weak state in which he was would probably produce syncope, during which his soul, already tracia non, to quit or to remain in its earthly tenement, would most probably take its departure. After this and other explanations on the subject, Napoleon acquiesced in my opinion that he should not try the experiment, observing that in such cases les hommes de l'art, men of the art, were the best judges. At 10 o'clock the following morning, symptoms decidedly mortal made their appearance, and about 4 poor Cipriani was numbered with the dead. Cipriani was a man possessed of strong but uncultivated talents, though artful. He had the appearance of openness and candor. He had, however, many good qualities. He was generous and charitable, like most of his countrymen. He was an ardent friend and a bitter enemy, and had strong national spirit. He was a Republican in principle and manifested more attachment to Napoleon in his misfortunes than he had ever shown for him in his grandeur. He was regarded by his master in a very confidential light. Had he enjoyed the benefit of an early education, he would probably have made a figure in the Revolution. He had been unwell for several days before he complained, during which, in all probability, latent inflammation had been going on. His corpse was followed to the grave by Counts Bertrand and Montsalon, by myself, and by all the household who could attend. So much was he esteemed at St. Helena that several of the most respectable of the inhabitants and some of the officers of the 66th Regiment voluntarily joined the funeral procession. Had he been buried within the limits Napoleon himself would have attended? Immediately after his death, I reported the circumstance to Napoleon, who remarked, "Where is his soul? Gone to Rome, perhaps, to see his wife and child before it undertakes the long final journey?" Some days before his demise, Cipriani told me that not long after the governor had put into execution his rigorous measures towards the inmates of Longwood, Cipriani, who was of a merry disposition, had been observed to be much altered and apparently thoughtful and melancholy. One day he came into Cipriani's room and avowed his intention of shooting the governor. The first time that the latter came to Longwood, Cipriani asked him if he was mad and endeavored to dissuade him from the attempt by using all the arguments in his power. Although Cipriani had much influence over him, Santini was unmoved and accompanied his declaration with many oaths peculiar to the inferior order of Italians. He had his double-barreled gun loaded with ball, with which he intended to dispatch the governor and then to finish himself. Cipriani, finding his arguments fruitless, went to Napoleon, to whom he communicated the affair. The emperor immediately sent for and questioned Santini, who avowed his intentions. Napoleon then commanded him, as his emperor, to drop all thoughts of injuring Sir Hudson Lowe, and succeeded, though not without some reluctance, on the part of Santini in making him abandon his project. Santini was a most determined character and brave as a lion. Besides being master of the small sword, he had a sure and deadly aim with firearms, and there is little doubt that had it not been for this prohibition, he would have effected his intentions. March 6th. The progress of the disease in the emperor continues to advance a little, though slowly. Found him reading a volume of Corneille, upon whom he pronounced some warm eulogiums. Observed that to the sentiments which he inspired, France was indebted for some of her glorious deeds, and added that if Corneille had lived in his time, he would have made him a prince. He then conversed about himself, said that he believed nature had calculated him for great reverses, that he had a soul of marble, after which he made some comparisons of his own conduct with that of